This interview with Ash Borer that you are about to see was recorded on Tuesday, June 24th, but we have a really important update. So earlier today, Thursday, Ash, along with one other hunger striker, both of them were on their 18th day of hunger strike, they, along with 6 other members of Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago, were arrested. They were arrested at Senator Tammy Duckworth's office for demanding a meeting in person. Senator Duckworth has repeatedly dodged their request for a constituent meeting about the situation in Gaza. You can call Senator Duckworth's Chicago office at 312-886-3506. That's 312-886-3506. Or you can call her Washington, D.C. office at 202-224-2854 and demand an end to U.S. weapons sales to Israel. This is a total outrage. You have people who were arrested who are on an 18 days so far, on their 18th day of a hunger strike. They're in wheelchairs, and as you can see, they are handled without a lot of care, and they were detained. And it is an outrage that in this country, the crime is not supporting or engaging in genocide. The crime is protesting it.
Okay, calm down.
Yeah, so I and other members of the JVP Chicago chapter are on an indefinite hunger strike for Gaza, because what we're watching in this moment is a manufactured humanitarian crisis of starvation. There are 2 million people in Gaza who have been going without food, without water, without medicine, almost completely since Israel unilaterally broke the ceasefire in March. And we already know that that situation only intensified so much want and need over the last 19 months of bombing and 20 years of blockade before that. So we're on hunger strike to demand that our government do everything in its power to stop the starvation. And we know that the clearest and shortest path to doing that is to stop arming Israel.
And where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so when we were at the national member meeting for Jewish Voice for Peace, which was just an incredible meeting of Jews and allies in the pro-Palestine movement about a month ago, as several Palestinian leaders from various organizations across the movement came to us and said, the thing that we are watching and waking up every day fearing is that our friends, our family, our community members are at imminent risk of starvation. And we need you to do everything you can in order to call attention to the starvation in Gaza and hopefully to end it. And so those of us who were at the national member meeting brought this idea back to the chapter. And one of the ideas that came out of strategizing about what would it take to actually make every person in the US understand the starvation of epic proportions and feel moved enough to do everything that they can to stop it. And so we've taken on this tactic of a hunger strike, which has deep roots and deep learning in anti-imperialist and anti-colonial struggles across the world, of course, including in Palestine and by Palestinians, especially political prisoners.
Right. And of course, a fascinating thing is I actually did a live show on this in Ireland, but there's a kind of amazing connection between hunger strikers in Palestine prisons and hunger strikers in Irish prisoners. So that's a really fascinating and inspiring connection that exists there.
We actually just today, earlier today at noon, had a teach-in with an organization called Chicago Irish for Palestine that did a teach-in in Chicago about the history of hunger strikes and the Ireland-Palestine connection, really bringing to life how important and how powerful this tactic has been at moving people in Ireland and in Palestine. And we take so much inspiration from the people who come before us who have used this tactic really bravely.
Oh, wow. And I didn't even know that. So that was not just a setup for Ash. So speaking of hunger strikes, we're going to get more into kind of the connection between hunger strikes and colonialism, also colonialism and Palestine. But, you know, according to an Al Jazeera news update, I see that 56 people have been killed near aid sites in the last day, with at least 86 killed throughout Gaza more broadly. According to the UN Rights Office, there have been at least 40 people killed at the private, quote unquote, private aid distribution sites associated with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation since operations began on May 27th. And of course, this is at the same time that there is all this distraction about a ceasefire or not in Iran, which of course is very important, but it helps take away focus from Gaza. And then Trump, of course, we're going to get into this later, scolded Israel for breaking it. The genocide continues without any scolding. You don't hear Israel being scolded for starving people to death and genociding people. So what is your reaction to this kind of never-ending barbarity that we're seeing right now?
I mean, it's horrifying. Like, I think, I've said the word genocide so many times over the last 19 months. And I think sometimes we say it so often that we lose sight of what that actually means. What it actually means is that so many people, tens of thousands of people, potentially 186,000 people, if you go by the Lancet's numbers, have been eviscerated, right, over the genocide. And now people who are in such a state of deprivation, whose cities have been bombed, whose hospitals have been closed, whose universities have been dismantled, whose schools have been attacked, right, are walking miles and miles a day in blistering heat to try to eke out just a small number of calories for them and their children, and they are being shot down by Israeli military and also by US contractors. It's like, there is, in a certain sense, like, there's nothing complicated about this. Like, either you are for the murdering of people seeking food, or you are against it. Either you are for the collective starvation and collective punishment of children, or you are against it. Like, one of the things that feels really central to me in this moment is, like, my people have undergone a genocide and pogroms and horrible things. And one of the lessons that I was always taught as a child is that part of the reason that genocide was able to continue is because people stood by and did nothing. And I refused to be a person who stood by and did not do everything in my power to stop it. And that includes putting my body on the line, as I'm doing right now, and as I have done in the West Bank many times between Palestinian comrades and the Israeli army. And I will continue to do until Palestine is free.
So let's actually talk about your personal relationship to this issue and your personal evolution. What is your relationship to Judaism, to Israel, to Palestine? And how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an extremely Zionist household. A large part of my family lives in Israel. Going back and forth, my Israeli cousins, some of them lived with me when I was a child. I spent some time over there when I was a child. I went to Zionist schools and summer camps and synagogues. I grew up extremely religious. My family and I were part of Chabad for many years. And I was, at one point as a teenager, so convinced of the Zionist project that I considered joining the Israeli army myself. And everything really changed for me. When I was a young adult, I started learning Arabic. And the first time that I went to the territory between the river and the sea as an Arabic speaker, and I started to see things incredibly differently. I started to see how discrimination and how apartheid are daily realities. I started to walk through checkpoints at which I was able to go through freely and at which Palestinians stand for hours and hours and hours. I walked on streets in Hebron where, because I'm a Jewish person, I was able to walk there, while Palestinians are shut into their homes, unable to open their front doors. I have watched the Israeli army brutalize people. I have watched them demolish homes and community centers. I have watched them target nonviolent activists with arrests and beatings. And I have watched settlers do violence on friends and comrades with absolute impunity. And that, for me, is the absolute opposite of what Jewish values stand for. Like, Jewish values for me stand, like, the number one rule in Jewish law is that in the face of saving a human life, every other rule goes out the window. That is the only thing that we are really commanded to do. And what I see the Israeli army doing is just so contrary to any Jewish teaching I have ever received, even in those Zionist summer schools and summer camps and schools and synagogues, that it really had a profound effect. And I really feel like using my voice as a Jewish person to call attention to the just craven distortion of my people and our history toward the end of violence and genocide is just like the most important thing for me.
So let's, I just wanted to show this slideshow of you and your comrades. Here we go. So can you tell us who these various people are?
Yeah, so the people standing in the background are some of the hunger strikers. The person in the foreground is Rep. Delia Ramirez, who is my congressperson and one of the co-sponsors of the Block the Bombs bill, which would condition military aid to Israel. That's me, speaking at a press conference on day one. I look a lot livelier then than I do now. And this is Professor Iman Abdelhadi, Palestinian professor at the University of Chicago and local Chicago activist for Palestine. That's Illinois State Rep. Graciela Guzman, who is also my representative. And this is, we did a vigil for the murdered children of Gaza, which we read several hundred names in opposition to the genocide, because every single person who has been killed is a real person, was someone's whole world, was someone's child, was someone's grandparent, and deserves to be remembered not just as a number, but as a name. This is a beautiful kippah with the Palestinian flag on it at one of our events this week. We're doing events every day this week. If you're in Chicago, please come down to Federal Plaza. We're doing events every day. This is us, some of us on day 5. We've already been confined to wheelchairs.
And so those are people who are not usually in wheelchairs. They're
correct. Those are people who are not normally in wheelchairs, but for whom standing up for large periods of time or walking distances have become so incredibly hard at day 5 that they're in wheelchairs, as am I.
Wow. And you know, it's interesting because you just mentioned that you've been needing a wheelchair. One of the things is that you're sitting down in a chair. I haven't like interviewed you before. So for me, you just kind of look like you don't look exhausted to me. Can you, but I mean, I know you, I'm sure you are, and it's very like deceiving because you're sitting down, but can you tell us like what you're feeling right now? If you're scared, if you think every now and then you're like, why am I doing this? This is too hard. What keeps you going?
Well, I mean, just to like, as for a small anecdote, yesterday I went to a rally, a hands-off Iran rally with like dozens of organizations in the city of Chicago. And the way that the microphones were set up, I couldn't move my wheelchair in there. So I was like, it's fine. I'm only going to speak for 3 to 5 minutes. I'll stand. And in that 3 to 5 minutes, I almost passed out and had to sit on the ground in order to continue my speech. We're experiencing all the symptoms of starvation, like body aches, pains, being freezing cold, headaches, muscle weakness, like nausea. Like, it's not a comfortable experience, but there is nothing that I would not do to save Palestinians in Gaza, literally nothing. And so there has never been a moment in all of this that has in any way dampened my resolve. I would say, quite honestly, it's the opposite. Like every day I'm hearing from Palestinians who are telling me how meaningful this is. And if the only thing that I achieve is that Palestinians in Palestine or here feel like they are less alone and feel like someone is like listening to their just anguish and terror at what is happening to them and their people, like that is enough. I don't need anything more than that.
Okay, I'm going to start this with an apology for yesterday's video, which I will not remove, because I still meant what I said. But I'm very angry. One thing that I'm not, I just don't want to tolerate people acting like they know more than me. It's getting really annoying. I've been involved in a lot of things for years. And, for anybody to come act like they understand the geopolitical sphere better than me is insulting. You're insulting my intelligence by doing that. I've been around a lot of places, and usually my predictions turn out to be the case because I'm watching the trends. It's no psychic crystal ball or anything. I just understand geopolitics. So it's Friday. And that means when the sun goes down, it will be Shabbos or Shabbat. Shabbat in Hebrew, Shabbos in Yiddish, which means Sabbath. So, I want to show you a video which has been posted on my channel and other channels. You can find it on my channel. But I want to show you a video of Jewish Palestinians. Now, the Jewish Palestinians live in a community called Meir Sharim. Now, for those of you who don't know this, Meir Sharim predates 1948. What's the relevance of this? 1948 is when the Zionist State of Israel was founded. A couple facts about Meir Sharim. Their primary language is not Hebrew. Their primary language is Yiddish. Now, they all speak Yiddish, and some of them also speak Arabic as well as Yiddish, but they all speak Yiddish. They are Palestinians. They had been acknowledged as Palestinian, and this was before 1948, and they always objected to the State of Israel. They will all die to the last man, woman, and child to protect their Palestinian heritage. And yet people like to act like the State of Israel, you know, and Palestine, they're just in some conflict. No, the State of Israel is a settler colonial country. It has nothing to do with the true Jewish diaspora nation. And the true Jewish diaspora nation is based on culture and religion. I've been saying this for years. I understand that this shits all over the Hegelian logic of nation state, but the nation state cannot be fixed. You have to get rid of the nation state. I mean, really, you should get rid of the state in general, but if that is not possible, we should at least get rid of the nation state. Now, there's an underlying truth that a lot of people don't want to hear, and that's the reason why people don't want to talk about the liberation of Palestine and the acknowledgement of a Jewish diaspora nation and a denouncing of the falsities that is the Zionist state, the Zionist nation state of Israel, is because then that means that you have to put the United States in the same category. And it's true. The United States of America is a settler colonial country. The natives do deserve their land back. All that has happened is that land grab after land grab after land grab has taken away from the native, peoples on these lands we call the Americas. Each treaty has been violated. The treaties are bullshit. The treaties don't matter. Just like the Oslo Accords in the Middle East, they did not matter. They still don't matter. What matters only is liberation or destruction. I choose liberation. That's why I've said nonviolence is Stockholm Syndrome. Now, I'm sure there's some confusion because there's a lot of misgivings about the Jewish peoples. Like, are you guys violent? Are you nonviolent? Neither, actually. We don't turn the other cheek. We are Jewish. But what we have is a concept I call non-aggression. This is why I don't like it when people don't let us take back words that are stolen, literally stolen from the right wing, because they're not from the right wing. Usually they're from radical religious people who find themselves on the left. And because that has to be trivialized by communists and anarchists alike, then it doesn't matter. But this is exactly why there will never be any more of a successful Marxist revolution, and why there's never been a successful anarchist revolution, and there never will be. Because you don't appeal to the masses. What's going to happen when an abused proletariat takes power, takes power, and then they become a new bourgeoisie? What stops them from becoming a new bourgeoisie? The only thing that I can think of is religiosity. But I'm sure that that's simplistic to everybody else. And that's because you forget that class and race are irrelevant compared to caste. They're both caste. That's the problem with your broken dialectics, is caste. It's all caste. It's not that race is caste and class is race or whatever. No, it's all the caste system. It's not the patriarchy. It's not this or that. It's the caste system. Race and class are just manifestations of the caste system. And by the way, despite my disagreement with that chauvinistic using of the word patriarchy, I am not saying that there's not male chauvinist domination around the world. There is. So, I mean, MGTOW is gay. I'll say it that way. MGTOW is gay. And that is not a slur on gay. I mean, gay can be... Gay is the new Smurf, okay? I'm just going to start being open with where I'm coming from. Gay is the new Smurf. You can't say Smurf anymore because Smurf has become a racial slur. But gay can be positive or negative depending on how you're saying it. So, for instance, here's a thing that we say in PSFM. The white man is gay. What does that mean? Well, first of all, you have to understand that he's not white because he's gay. He's gay because he's white. In other words, it's all projection. Whether you're pro-homosexual, homophobic, or you are gay yourself, the fact of the matter is that this was never that big of a deal to a lot of people. I know that that's hard for people to swallow, but swallow. I said swallow. That's hilarious. I know that that's hard for people to digest. Damn. We have such vulgar language in our time. It's amazing that our children are growing up so fucked up in the head. But anyway, it's hard for people to grasp, I'm sure. But it's really the white man that is obsessed with homosexuals, obsessed with trans people and all this. That's the white man's obsession. And whiteness is not about your skin color. The skin color just causes the nepotism. Whiteness is about power. That's what it is. That's why when you say white power, it is racist. And when you say white pride, it is racist. But when you say black power or black pride, you're actually saying revolution and liberation. So, I'm going to show you this video of the Jewish Palestinians as the Zionist settlers come and take away the Palestinian flags. Now, one of the reasons why this doesn't get the real coverage is because they're religious and they're not aggressive, because genuine religious people are not aggressive. Some will believe in self-defense like the Muslims, and they should. And it's not that Jewish people don't believe in self-defense, like I said, it's that we're non-aggressive. Non-aggressive, and that gets back to what I said about right-wingers appropriating radical religious terms. Because non-aggression principle is used by the anarcho-capitalists. What are the anarcho-capitalists? Well, they're not anarchists, they're fascists, actually. Just like National Socialist is not socialist, it's fascist. That's what fascists do. They use socialist terms. They particularly use socialist terms. Why do they do that? They do it because that way they can bring people onto their side or take advantage of the confusion of the uneducated masses. And it might surprise you to know the class, since everybody likes the word class, the class that likes to be educated the most, that wants education, happens to be the lumpen proletarian. And I'm going to say something else. There is no first world proletarian. There isn't, unless we're talking about black people, because who built all this shit? Black people did. They built it. That's what they did. They built it. And therefore they are the proletariat. So, here's the video of Meir Shirim. And these are the Jewish Palestinians which predate the Zionist state.
Abnehmen die Fenner, abnehmen die Fenner.
Abnehmen die Fenner oder die ganze Messe?
Ja. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Sind die Fenner, die Fenner, die Fenner. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Was? Was steht da? Ja, weiter?
Ehle, geh mal, guck mal rein, wo es ist.
Ja, שוטר? Ne, er gewinnt da בכלל. זה אותו הסגרת עם לק.
Esta me dispiste de dónde está el Yedudim.
אבל איפה הכיתות לכם? למה אתם לא יהודים? למה רק זה מעניין אתכם בתור יהדות? למה רק זה מעניין אתכם בתור יהדות?
I'm the Palestinian terrorist. That's why say Palestinian.
נגד מאה שערים, נגד מאה שערים. נגד מאה שערים, נגד מאה שערים.
טובי! היה בגימורי.
Aqui no final, eles estão lá no aqui no final. Aqui no final. Oi!
ראית מה עשה פה שזה לילד? הוא כן וואי, הוא מגיע עם התיק מהחיידר, אה?
היטלר! היטלר! היטלר!
הלו!
Free, free Palestine, and long live the Jewish diaspora. The state of Israel exists at the expense of both.
Israeli forces have detained two relatives of the suspected Palestinian gunman. The raid took place in the village of Nilin in the occupied West Bank. Let's get more with Nida Ibrahim, who joins us from Ramallah. So, Nida, a raid in Nilin in the occupied West Bank following that shooting in Tel Aviv. Tell us what happened.
People there told us that the Israeli forces have stayed there for 6 hours, where confrontations erupted between Palestinians in Na'lin and the Israeli forces. We know that they've detained the father and the brother of the shooter, as well as taking measurements of the house in preparation for a house demolition. What happens in these cases that usually when there are Israelis who are killed, it's becoming a standard Israeli procedure to demolish the home of the shooters. Now, in this case, we don't have any killed people in the shooting in Tel Aviv yet, but usually this is the standard practice by the Israeli forces. Now, also there was another incident elsewhere in the occupied West Bank where a Palestinian, a 21-year-old, was killed by Israeli forces, by an Israeli settler. He was near an illegal Israeli settlement outpost, and according to witnesses, they say they don't know what happened because The Israeli narrative is that he had weapons or at least knives, and he tried to attack an Israeli settler. But we don't have a Palestinian narrative to counter that. It's hard to know what happened. But it's worth mentioning that the Israeli raids have been intensifying in the occupied West Bank, the house demolitions as well. The killings, we're talking about 78 Palestinians who were killed by Israeli forces since the beginning of the year. And we're only in March.
Indeed. Nida, thank you for that. Nida Ibrahim live for us there in Ramallah.
So, yeah. Good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Now we want to turn to our first story. Just terrible situation in Palestine. Brutal attacks on Palestinians. Maybe that's par for the course, but still brutal and outrageous. And as always, we are honored to be joined here by Ali Abu Nima, who's the director of Electronic Intifada, also the author of The Battle for Justice in Palestine. Ali, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thank you, Gene.
Well, I was hoping we could just start, maybe you could give folks some context to this, I'm always hesitant to call it an escalation, but let's just call it significant outpouring of violence against Palestinians that we've seen over the past week or so.
Yeah, it's hard to find the right term, because if we say escalation or outbreak, it makes it seem as if normally there isn't violence. And I think the reality that we have to try to convey to people is that the violence is relentless. Israeli military occupation, Israeli settler colonialism, Israeli apartheid is 24/7, 365 violence against every Palestinian man, woman, and child everywhere all the time. They're never free from the violence. What we've seen since the beginning of the year is Israel has escalated its raids into Palestinian cities and refugee camps. It's killed almost 70 Palestinians since the start of the year, and many of them in these massive daytime raids that have happened in cities like Jenin and Nablus. For example, in Nablus on February 22nd, a massive Israeli army force went into the very densely populated old city of Nablus in broad daylight, guns blazing, firing indiscriminately, and killing a dozen Palestinians and injuring 100 more. This has been happening all over the place. And so quite predictably and inevitably, there has been an upsurge in Palestinian resistance. This year, so far, 13 Israelis have been killed in the context of violence. 7 of them were killed in a single shooting attack that came again in response to one of these massive Israeli raids on a Palestinian community in which multiple people were killed. So it's a cliche to talk about a spiral of violence or a cycle of violence, because that erases the responsibility. But we can talk about a spiral of escalation. I don't know if that metaphor even works, but there is sort of a violence escalator. At the root of it is the violence of the Israeli occupation and settler colonial invasion of Palestinian land. That's what's driving it. And what
Ali,
sorry.
No, please. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead. I thought you were. Well, I wanted to ask you. This is fun. You go ahead, and then I'll go ahead. Let's do that.
Well, I just wanted to say that that's sort of the broad context for what we saw in that brief clip, which is the settler pogrom in the village of Hawara, where 2 settlers were killed a week ago on Sunday. 2 settlers were killed in Hawara village, and then the Israeli army allowed hordes of settlers to pour into the town, ransacking businesses, setting fire to homes, killing one Palestinian, and taking their revenge. And all of this, it's important to note, because these images were so shocking to people around the world that Israeli leaders started to say, "Oh, we'll have to put a stop to this sort of thing. This isn't what we intended." It is what they intended, because prior to this pogrom and during the pogrom, top Israeli leaders were inciting it, praising it, saying that we want to see Hawara burned, we want to see the village destroyed. Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister, on the same Sunday when the two settlers were killed, said Israel should go mad on the Palestinians and start attacking Palestinian cities with tanks and helicopters. So the settlers were simply doing the bidding of the Israeli state.
And I'm glad that you raised that, because the response from the US and the EU has been very much to try to condemn both sides, but in interestingly different ways. I actually want to show a clip of Ned Price being asked about this, if we could bring that up, and I'd like to get your reaction to it.
Yes. Hi. I noticed in your tweet yesterday you referred to the shooting in which 2 Israelis were killed as a terror attack or terrorism, whereas the settler violence was separated. Was that deliberate? And if yes, how do you differentiate or decide when to use the word terrorism versus when not to?
I think it's best not to parse and to go into definitions from the podium. We are condemning the extremist violence that we've seen over the past couple days. We issued a very strong condemnation of the killing of the Israelis that we've seen over the weekend. We've issued today a very strong condemnation of the violence that's resulted in the death of Palestinian and the destruction of property. In all of these cases, in all cases of extremist violence, we think it's important that there be accountability, that there be justice, equal justice under the law.
So Ali, I mean, that's, to me, what I see there is Israeli settlers committing acts of violence, committing a pogrom is just violence. And it's bad, but it's violence. Whereas Palestinians who live in the West Bank attacking settlers is terrorism. What do you have to say to that?
Yes, that's consistent. Israelis can't do terrorism. Only Palestinians can, according to both the United States and the European Union, because the European Union, being the lapdogs of the United States, copy exactly what the Americans say and do. And so the EU position has been identical. But listen to what Ned Price said. He said, equal justice under the law. What law is he talking about? First of all, we're in occupied territory where Israel is the military occupier. And under the Israeli military occupation, there is no equal justice under the law. Palestinians live under Israeli military rule and military orders, whereas the Israeli settlers live under Israeli civil law. So right there on paper, you have a separate and unequal system. You have an apartheid system. If you're an Israeli settler, you're not subject to military law. You're subject to the Israeli civil system. If you're a Palestinian, you're subject to Israeli military law. But if you're a Palestinian, you don't get as far as the law. If you pick up a stone, you'll just be shot dead. Whereas the settlers are treated with kid gloves. In fact, they're protected by the army while they are busy attacking Palestinians. And that's not just in Hawara, that's all the time. In fact, for example, you could go to the website of B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, or their YouTube channel. They have tons of videos going back years documenting Israeli settlers attacking Palestinians, attacking and killing Palestinian livestock, burning their property, destroying their trees, while the soldiers are watching and just, protecting the settlers while they do this job of vandalizing Palestinian property and making Palestinian life hell on behalf of the Israeli state. The settlers are the fist of the Israeli state, of Israeli land theft and settler colonization. And that is absent from the language of the State Department. And when he talks about equal justice under the law, who's going to bring this equal justice? The military occupier? I mean, we're coming up. I can't believe how fast we're coming up. It will be on May the 11th, the first anniversary of the cold-blooded murder on live television of Shireen Abu Akleh, a U.S. citizen and the correspondent of Al Jazeera. Has there been justice for Shireen Abu Akleh? On the contrary, the United States government helped Israel cover up her deliberate murder. And this has been the policy of the Biden administration, of the Democratic Party, that the more extreme, the more violent, the more fanatical Israel shows itself to be, the more the Democrats do to cover it up. The more that Joe Biden does and Antony Blinken do to cover it up and to try to blame Palestinians for it and tell Palestinians, you guys, you need to calm down. You need to calm down and restore calm. While they're shipping every weapon in the American stockpile to Ukraine so Ukrainians can fight back against Russia, they're telling Palestinians, you just need to calm down and take it. And if you lift so much as a rock in the face of your invaders and your occupiers, then you're a terrorist, and they have the right to shoot you dead. This is the reality. It's a reality that I don't think any people in the world would accept. But Palestinians are told, just calm down and accept it. And if you're good, if you behave well, maybe we'll give you a couple of $1 million more for health clinics in refugee camps where you're going to live forever, by the way, because we're never going to support justice for you so that you can go back to your homes.
No, it's no lies detected. I mean, I for sure. I mean, it's unbelievable, almost like the fairy tale nature of some of this, the way it's, I remember during the Great March of Return, you know, people are peacefully marching, getting sniped down. And then when Israel's being criticized, it's like, well, there's terror kites being flown. And it's just so absurd that you would think like this is so laughable, but it's allowed to you know, play out in the media. And certainly if you want to comment on that, I'm happy to hear. But one thing I want to also ask your thoughts on, Ali, is it seems that the resistance in Palestine, especially amongst young people, is also strengthening majorly. I mean, I'm seeing all these videos of these night marches of people coming out, the calls from Lion's Den from people to resist. Now I see the PA trying to catch up at the last second and say they're going to do something too. So I wonder how you also evaluate, you know, what seems to me to be almost a generational changing of the guard here of Palestinians really coming out in a powerful way.
I think, you know, let's step back and look at the big picture, because the particulars of what's been happening now can only be understood against the bigger picture. Since Israel was established by force and illegitimately over the ruins of hundreds of Palestinian towns and villages, Israel has tried to subdue the indigenous Palestinian population with every violent method. Regular massacres, which we've seen throughout the West Bank, in Gaza, even of Palestinians within so-called Israel, punitive home demolitions, revenge demolitions, a tactic which is reserved for Palestinians. Israel will never demolish the family home of a Jew who murders a Palestinian. That punishment is reserved only for the families of Palestinians, collective punishment. A very savage method, always used by colonial regimes, is if we make the natives suffer enough, eventually they will accept their subordinate position and stop resisting. So murder, imprisonment, torture, home demolitions, aerial bombing, anything, Israel has done it. And 75 years after the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, the Palestinian people are not subdued. And remember, the Israeli justification for these murderous raids in Jenin, in Nablus, in Hebron, wherever it is, oh, this is to thwart terrorist attacks. Well, the very next day, Palestinian resistance groups can carry out sophisticated operations against Israel. And an even more common phenomenon is these individual actions by Palestinians, Palestinians picking up a knife or picking up a gun and going to get, going to retaliate, or you could say get revenge. Israel cannot stop it. In fact, everything Israel does fuels it. And so what we see is a frustration in the settler state that, look, we've done everything to these people and they're still fighting back. So it's a constant escalation of Israeli terror, of Israeli collective punishment, with the aim of subjugating this people who refuse to be subjugated. So when you look at this young generation, they're undeterred. They are undeterred, but they also have no choice because, people are already living in refugee camps like Aqbat Jabir or Arub or the camps across the West Bank, which Israel is raiding, Sha'afat camp. The Palestinians, okay, we're already in refugee camps. What do you want from us? No, they're still sending in the army and attacking people in refugee camps and killing them and carrying out extrajudicial executions. So it's not as if people have a choice but to fight back and defend themselves. That's what Palestinians are doing. They have a right to fight back. They have a right to defend themselves. And who are all these people in the West to quibble with them? People who are okay with Israel using anti-tank missiles in the middle of the old city of Nablus. People who are okay with Israel using high-powered sniper rifles against children at the Great March of Return. And they're quibbling with the Palestinians throwing stones? Are you kidding me? Then send the Palestinians precision-guided missiles so that they can take out the Israeli military bases and the military command posts where these attacks against them are being planned. But Palestinians are left alone against a merciless nuclear-armed enemy, and then they're being lectured from the West, oh, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that. Palestinians won't take those lectures from people, and they will fight back with the means they have. And the escalation is coming only from the occupier and the invader. This conflict would be over tomorrow if Israel were to respect the rights of Palestinians, were to respect international law, and were to respect the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. But the reality is this: if Palestinians stop resisting, they will be wiped out. If Israel stops attacking them, there will be peace.
Well, Ali, that is very true. And I appreciate you, as always, being willing to join us and help us sort through all of this. And I hope everyone is following the Electronic Intifada, which I think is necessary reading. But thanks again for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.